Good evening, folks.
Are we expecting that?
I don't think so. This is a popular series, or at least number one is. We'll see if people come back for it. If it's still popular at number 7, then it's a good topic. And we have people joining us on live stream. And if you should fall asleep and want to catch this again, go to the Temple Israel Canton YouTube channel, and you'll be able to see the live stream. This is the first in a series of 7 topics on enduring tensions in Jewish thought. That's tension, T-E-N-S-I-O-N, which you get when you pull things in opposite directions. Tonight we're going to look at particularism and universalism, which seem like they're opposites, but we'll see how in classical Judaism and even in modern and contemporary Jewish thought, they are in harmony with each other. Next week we'll look at tradition on the one hand and innovation on the other, and then about faith and doubt. The 4th session is on peoplehood and religion. We'll go into a little bit of that tonight. Then survival and ethics. It's one thing, it's good to survive, but at what cost? And at what point to do your, really, what is worth dying for? The 6th session is on lament and hope. And then finally about freedom on the one hand and responsibility on the other. But we start with particularism and universalism because this idea of the Jews being chosen, what in Hebrew is called Am Nivchar, the chosen people, is at once a source of pride and shame. It is something that makes us an object of envy and an object of derision. And sometimes to modern Jews, it feels uncomfortable to think of ourselves as being different than anyone else, especially in a universalistic and pluralistic world. But Jewish tradition insists at once on uniqueness and on a mission that benefits all of humanity. So we're going to explore tonight how sources and thinkers negotiate these 2 poles of being particular and universal. But we're going to begin with an eternal question. Those who are old enough recall that a few decades ago there was a big fight, especially around the time of mass exodus of Jews from the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union collapsed, and the influx of Jews from Ethiopia into Israel. There was a big question about who is a Jew, which sounds like a Jeopardy response. Who is a Jew? I'll take questions that only Jews care about for 1,000. Who is a Jew? Everybody else seems to know who is a Jew. We recognize each other in the grocery store. Earlier today, I was at BJ's, and someone noticed that I had purchased a loaf of challah and said to me, and I didn't know the person, but said to me, "Is this for Shabbos?" And I thought, nothing good can come of this, so I said, "What's that?" But we're going to look at a different take on this question of who is a Jew. And instead of focusing on, is this one Jewish, is that one Jewish, we're going to look at what is a Jew. So we'll start with a little video so that you can hear someone other than me for just a moment.
What is a Jew? That question is confusing, not just to non-Jews, but often to Jews themselves. Are Jews a race, a religion, a nation, a people, a family, a culture? Many people would say they're all of the above. And the reality is the Jewish people are all of the above except for one of those, a race. How do we know the Jewish people are not a race? Because if you look at Jews from around the world, especially if you visit the land of Israel, you'll see that Jews come in all size, shapes, and colors. And besides that fact, anyone can join the Jewish people. If it was a racial definition, you can't join a race. But being a Jew is not just a national identity, and it's not just a religious identity. It's not just like being American or French or English or Russian, and it's not just like being a Christian or a Muslim or a Buddhist. It's both. There's a national component and a religious component to the Jewish people. There is a faith, but even a Jew who's not observant who professes to not even believe in God is still part of the Jewish people. And there's also a national component. But even a Jew who lives in Israel who's not observant is still part of the Jewish people. So it's complicated, but it's a combination of both. But the Jewish people are definitely a nation. The Jewish people have a land, a language, and a history. Ironically, we would say the Jewish people may have less of those things than most nations. Yes, the Jewish people have a land, and yes, there's been a Jewish state for 70 plus years. But for the last 2,000 years, the majority of the Jewish people have lived in a diaspora outside the land of Israel. Yes, the Jewish people have a language, Hebrew. But for more than 2,000 years, Hebrew was not a dead language, but it wasn't a spoken language. Only recently has it been resurrected as the national language of the Jewish state. And yes, the Jewish people have a history. But for thousands of years, Jews scattered around the world had very different histories from each other. But interestingly enough, to find people as old as the Jewish people who have survived, because if you look in history books, there are many ancient people. If you read the Bible, Hyksos, Phoenicians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Mycenaeans, where are all these people today? They're gone. If you want to visit them, you have to go to a museum or a history book. So ironically, the Jewish people, the Jewish nation, that has had such a crazy history and has spent so much of its time as a nation scattered around the world, is one of the oldest surviving nations on the planet Earth. Back in the land of Israel today, after 2,000 years of exile, the Jewish people have taken a licking, but they kept on ticking. I'm Ken Spiro, and you're watching JTV.
All right. So that's just a 2.5-minute video about what is a Jew. We are all of these things. And my interest in this question of what is a Jew stems from the research that I've been doing. And some of you have participated in a survey that I conducted earlier this calendar year. I think it was in January for my research. And I'll be, over the course of the next year, presenting that research, some of it at the high holidays. I get to defend my dissertation the morning of Arab Yom Kippur, which ensures that all of my sermons will be done and that I will not have on my white robe during that dissertation defense because I don't want to frighten the ministers. But this question of who are Jews, what are Jews, compelled me to look at some of these tensions that if somebody sees herself as a religious Jew, but not a cultural Jew, or an ethnic Jew, but not a national Jew, how can we be on the same page? It's hard enough to find things on which Jews agree. We make it even more complex because not only can we not exactly agree on who is a Jew, we don't have unanimity of opinion on what is a Jew. But on this spectrum of particularism on the one hand and universalism on the other, we can agree on a few things. That we are both particularistic and universalistic. So we'll start with this chosenness. Chosen for what? Jewish identity between distinctiveness and global concern. There's a famous line from Rabbi Hillel in the Mishnah. It is in Pirkei Avot, chapter 1, parak 14, that says, Hu haya omer, Hillel used to say, Im ein ani li mi li, u'cheshe'ani la'atzmi ma'ani, ve'im lo achshav eimatai. If I am not for myself, say it with me. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? And if I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? Being chosen does not mean only being for myself. It also does not mean only being for other people, and it certainly does not mean procrastinating. Yeah, I'll be for myself tomorrow. You may not get that chance, or I'm going to be for everybody else a week from Tuesday. I'll block it into my calendar. Be universalistic a week from Tuesday. It doesn't work like that. We hold these tensions between being particular and universal at once. And being chosen can evoke discomfort. We sometimes recoil at the implication of superiority. We don't want to have, we don't like white supremacists. Those of us who are white don't like white supremacists, even though they may think if they believe me at BJ's that I don't know what challah is and what Shabbos is, maybe they think I'm Lanzmann. He's white. No, he's not white. He's Jewish. So You think you're superior because you're white unless you're Jewish. So we're not in that club. We're uncomfortable with being different. Torah and the prophets repeatedly affirm Israel's uniqueness. We're not supposed to be just like everybody else. Being chosen means being something different. So from Abraham's call in Genesis 12 to Isaiah's vision, the challenge remains, how can we live faithfully into a mission that is both proudly particular, meaning I am for myself, and universally compassionate, meaning I'm also for other people. The Midrash Tanhuma emphasizes that chosenness is not about privilege, but it's about responsibility. So think of the wisdom of Spider-Man, created by a Jewish fellow named Stan Lee. With great power comes great responsibility. That being chosen to be bitten by the spider and getting that with that power comes responsibility. When we look at freedom and responsibility as two things in tension with each other, everybody wants to be free, but who wants to be responsible? Jerry Seinfeld says, who wants to be responsible? Anytime there's something bad, somebody says, who's responsible for this? Nobody wants to be responsible. But it comes with it. It comes with being chosen and accepting that chosenness, that we have a responsibility, not a privilege. Maimonides, in his Laws of War, his Laws of Kings, teaches that moral laws don't just apply to Jews, that the rest of humanity, all nations, are responsible for morality. So this idea of chosenness doesn't mean that we think we're better than everybody else. It means that we accept upon ourselves certain responsibilities that we do not expect of the rest of humanity. We don't expect the rest of humanity to keep the laws of kashrut. We expect the rest of humanity to follow maybe the Noahide laws. So you can eat meat, just make sure that the animal is dead. That doesn't seem like a lot to ask, but every law is there because somebody was doing it. So I can picture the theme restaurant in Dallas right now. You can think of, if you wonder about particularism and universalism and a rabbinic imperative, you don't have to look farther than the responsibility that Jews took in the civil rights movement. Pictures of people like Abraham Joshua Heschel, who said, I'm praying with my feet, when he marched with King and Selma and so forth. That Jews involved in global justice movements are people living out this idea that in order to be for myself, I have to be for other people. So we don't think we're better than everybody else. We just think that we are supposed to be different. So what are we chosen for? It's one of the most enduring and controversial themes in Jewish thought. For some, chosenness suggests superiority. For others, it's a source of pride and obligation. But what are we chosen for? What does chosenness mean for Jewish identity between distinctiveness and global responsibility? Well, let's look where we always start, at the Torah. Genesis 12, 1 and 2. Up to this point, we have humanity generally. But humanity isn't the first thing created. The first thing created is everything else before human beings. Humanity is the last thing created right before Shabbat. You got 10 generations from Adam to Noah, and then generations from Noah to Abraham. And we know that humanity is imperfect. Adam and Eve were imperfect. And then Noah's generation was so bad that God had to bring about a flood to use the cleansing nature of water to rid the world of violence. And then along comes Abraham, whom God calls and says, it says, Vayomer Adonai al Avram, God said to Abram, Lech lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladetecha u'mibeit avicha el ha'aretz asher ar'echa. God said to Abram, go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. So the first part of becoming part of that chosen people was being uncomfortable. God doesn't say to Avram, in order to be chosen, stay where you are and make it better in Ur of the Chaldees. In order for Avram to become Avraham. In order for Big Daddy, Avram, the big father, to become Avraham, the father of multitudes, he had to go someplace else. So there's a journey that's involved. This is like Greek mythology where there has to be a heroic journey. And Avram goes to the place that God would show him. And it's all been quiet since then. Nobody has ever argued that Jews are not allowed in the land where Abram went. But here, chosenness carries a dual meaning. It's God's promise that if Avram does something, if Avram will follow the command, go forth, lech lecha, get up and go, leave what you've known before, become uncomfortable, and have the trust in God that God will point you in the right direction, then we get verse 2. I will make of you a goy gadol, a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. There's a mission that extends beyond just Avram and his wife Sarai. It's beyond just their descendants who come after them. Because what follows is God's promise. Well, what does Genesis 12:3 say? Christian Zionists love this one. Through you, I will bless all of the people of the earth, and those who bless you, I will bless, and those who curse you, I will curse. Which, whatever problem we may have with Christian Zionists and evangelical love for Israel because they think they're going to bring about the Messiah, say, Gegenüber hate, we've been waiting 2,000 years, and so have you, so whatever. But this idea that Christians believe our Bible more than we do, that the idea of chosenness, that the Jews were chosen for something, not just to be God's suffering servant, as in Isaiah, but to be sort of a canary in a coal mine, that a nation and a civilization can be judged by how it treats its Jews. Every nation in Europe has expelled its Jews at one time or another, and then needed them back, because you need that, they get a shakup. They couldn't find a dentist. Through you, I will bless all of the peoples of the earth. So here, you're chosen. Go with it. And then we're also universal. The prophet Amos counters with the universal nature of humanity, not just the distinctiveness, but the universal nature of humanity, including Jews. Amos prophesied, to me, O Israelites, you are just like the Cushites. The Cushites are Ethiopia. Declares God, you're just like the people in Ethiopia. True, I brought Israel up from the land of Egypt. Remember that hero's journey? Avram goes from Ur of the Chaldees to the land of Israel. Israel is enslaved. The children of Israel are enslaved for 400 years in Egypt and are brought out of Egypt, leaving where they are comfortable in order to fulfill their mission to go back to the land that had been promised to them. I brought Israel up from the land of Egypt, but I also brought the Philistines from Kaftor and the Arameans from Kir. So don't think Israelites that you're the only people who've ever relocated. There are lots of people with lots of different missions, and as we saw in that brief video, there are lots of ancient peoples. Lots of ancient peoples beyond the ancient Near East. There are civilizations older than the Jews. You probably eat some of their food on the weekends and on Christmas. China, Japan, India are civilizations older than the Jews. What is different between the Chinese civilization, the Indian civilization, the Japanese civilization, and Jewish civilization? What's the key difference?
No one has ever forced them out.
They stayed in their native lands and were not exiled. Exactly right. You should be a past president of the Temple of Israel like 6 times. Forget it. You become past president twice now because you got the right answer. Other peoples have endured, other civilizations have endured with their distinctiveness in their land, with a culture, an ethnicity, a language, a people. But Jews have lived all over the world and carried that distinctiveness with us wherever we go. Sometimes we relocate by choice, sometimes by force, but everywhere we go, we maintain our Judaism. The prophet Amos here pushes back and says, so already in the Torah and in the prophets, we see this tension. Israel is distinct, but Israel is always distinct for the purpose of serving others. A world where everybody is Jewish is boring. Would also not last very long, because if there are 14 million Jews in the world today, how can we really support 14 million synagogues? Because you have to be in a synagogue where you agree with everybody. So here are some rabbinic and classical voices. Mishnah Sanhedrin tells us, this is a famous one, one who destroys a life, it is as if they have destroyed a whole world. This particular link to a covenant and the value of human life. That just because you're chosen doesn't mean you can ignore moral law. That means you're better than anybody else. Your blood is no redder than anybody else's. Rashi and Nachmanides reiterate that chosenness is not a privilege, but an accountability. To be chosen is to bear more responsibility than the rest of humanity, which is a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, we like to think that we are distinct. We bear more responsibility. It is very Jewish to say, it is my responsibility to save the world. But what happens when the rest of humanity expects things of us that they don't expect of themselves? It's a double standard. Like, I can say what I want about my family, but you can't say anything about my family. Why hasn't peace broken out in the Middle East? It must be the Jews. You know, that's a classical Jewish response that is loved by anti-Semites. The classical Jewish response to Jewish suffering is, whose fault is it? Ours. This is we don't do this in the Reform liturgy, but in the traditional Musaf liturgy, it says, Mipnei chata'enu galinu me'artzenu. Because of our sins, our chet, which we're going to say, al chet shechatanu lefanecha, this transgression and so forth. Because of our transgressions, we were exiled from our land. Not because of the Babylonians, not because of the Romans, but because we did something wrong. What this does psychologically is for the suffering, it takes the power away from the oppressor and gives that power to the oppressed. All I need to do in order to make life better is pray harder, do my sacrifices more, live a more moral life. And we know it's backwards thinking. The world's problems are not because of the Jews. Now, there are problems in the Middle East in which Israel has a hand. I'm pretty sure that there are no problems in the United Arab Emirates that were caused by Jews. I am pretty sure that the Saudi royal family is not the responsibility of the Jews. But just about anything else, people will come up with convoluted mental gymnastics to figure out why things are our fault. But that's very Jewish of them. The rabbis also speak of our ritual distinctiveness, that to be chosen means we take upon ourselves certain rituals that make us peculiar. Shabbat, Kashrut, Brit Milah, these are things that mark Jews as being different, but the prophets remind us that that identity, that putting on the garb of Judaism without the inner components of Judaism is challah. It's like costume play, to look like a Jew but behave like somebody who isn't. Modern thinkers, probably the most prominent 19th century Jewish philosopher was Hermann Cohen, who said that chosenness is an ethical mission for humanity. An ethical mission for humanity. It is not ethnic superiority, because Judaism is more than one ethnicity. But if the chosenness is for all Jewish people, it can't just be one ethnic group thinking that it's superior to others. And yet we're just like everybody else, only more so. It's one of my favorite lines about Jews. We're just like everybody else, only more so. It is human nature to have somebody that you think you're better than. So we saw this in the early years of the creation of the state of Israel. that the highest people in the pecking order were the German Jews, but in German are called Yekes, or in Hebrew they're called Yekes. It means jacket, because these German Jews, like my wife's grandparents, came from Munich and Vienna to Tel Aviv. Who goes around in the middle of the desert in Tel Aviv? It's 150 degrees outside wearing a jacket. The German Jews, the Yekes. They were the upper crust, the Ashkenazi Jews from Germany and Austria. And next, below them, were the Eastern European Jews that were called the Ostjuden, my relatives from Russia and Romania and Ukraine. Well, the Romanians were the worst. That's my family. They said they were all thieves. That's the joke in Israel, is that in Israeli malls, they check your bag on your way in to make sure that you're not carrying a weapon. But the joke is that in the Romanian neighborhoods, they also check your bag on the way out. And then below the Ostjuden were Sephardic Jews, and then Mizrahi Jews. So even amongst ourselves, we have to have somebody who's our poor cousins, somebody that we look down upon. So an interesting tidbit about this and distinctiveness and universalism, thinking if I'm only for myself, what am I? The founders of Temple Israel were German Jews. The scions of early American Reform Judaism were German-speaking Jews. The conservative seminary, the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, was founded in large part by German Reform Jews in New York, because they didn't want the large influx of Eastern European Jews who had started coming in after 1881 to dirty up their Reform shuls or their Reform temples. So they created conservative synagogues. And you think there's tension still between Reform and conservative Judaism?
Yes.
Of course. We have to have somebody that we're different than. We have to be distinctive. And yet we're universal. Mordecai Kaplan is famous, but Mordecai Kaplan, who was a conservative rabbi, was the father of Reconstructionist Judaism. And he taught that Judaism is a civilization. The distinctiveness matters, but it has to be used to advance progress for everybody. And in changing some of the liturgy, one of Mordecai Kaplan's innovations was he took out references to Jewish distinctiveness. Now you may think, well, Reform Jews have done that. When we do an aliyah, where we make a blessing before reading the Torah, it says, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Asher bachar banu means blessed is God who has chosen us from amongst all peoples by giving us the Torah. When we sing Aleinu l'shabeach, Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol atet gedula li'otzer breshit. The next line, Shelo asanu kigoye ha'aratzot v'lo samanu kemishpachot ha'adama. It's less offensive if you don't know Hebrew, because it's a nice tune. But what it means is, Shelo asanu kigoye ha'aratzot, who has not made us like Goyei ha'aratzot, who has not made us like all the other nations of the earth. Shelo samchelkenu kahem, who has not given us a portion like theirs, and made us distinct amongst all the peoples of the earth. And we mean it so much that we bow. And then Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, from whom we'll hear in a little bit, spoke of covenantal pluralism, that every people is chosen for its own role, that the Jewish people is chosen for being Jewish, not for being better than anybody else. And for us to be universalistic, we have to be distinctive. If we cease to be who we are, we cease to be of service to the rest of humanity. Now, Reform Judaism's approach vacillates between the universal and the particular, so much so that that version of Aleinu that we just did was not done for many decades in Reform congregations. What was sung instead was, let us adore the ever-living God and render praise unto him who spread out the heavens and established the earth, whose glory is revealed in the heavens above. It is the second paragraph of Aleinu, which is universalist. The first paragraph is particular. Sometimes I'll do the other version of Aleinu, which is the same tune, but when I do the Aleinu l'shabach ladon hakol latet gdula le'otzei breshit shahu notesh hamayim b'yosei aretz u'moshav yikaro. That's me being universalist and taking out the particulars. In 1885, 140 years ago, when this congregation was founded, the Reform movement promulgated its first ideological platform in the United States, the Pittsburgh Platform, that stressed universal ethics and rejected Jewish distinctiveness. This is before the turn of the 20th century, before World War I, before World War II. This is when Reform Judaism was not, by and large, Zionist. Later platforms reintroduced peoplehood, trying to balance identity and global concern. And Reform Judaism, Reform liturgy, as I note, sometimes softens or interprets the chosen people language, emphasizing responsibility, justice, and repair, as opposed to we're different than everybody else. With good reason. You go to many Reform congregations, a good number of the people who are worshiping there are not Jewish. So how can we, with intellectual honesty, say, I'm chosen and my spouse is not? God choose somebody else. No, say, be distinctively who you are. If you try to be somebody else, it's going to be very difficult. Just be who you are. And if who you are is Jewish, you may just not be Jewish yet. You may be Jewish by accident, or you could become Jewish on purpose. And I like to think that those who are Jewish by accident, like I am, just because I was born to a Jewish parent, or Jewish parents, that I choose to be Jewish every day. Not on Mondays, that's my day off. When I'm not in the office, I'm out being Presbyterian. The food is delicious. And then I'm going to give you just a few examples of women's voices about distinctiveness and chosenness. Judith Plaskow, who was one of the first Jewish female theologians really to hit the scene in the second half of the 20th century, she wrote "Standing Again at Sinai." She said that it's important to note that in this covenant of chosenness, that women, while they may have at times been excluded from the covenant story, that chosenness has to be reconstructed to be inclusive, that covenant is responsibility and not superiority. So if we think of the Torah portion that's coming up, not this week, but the week after, the verses that Matthew will chant for us on Friday night, a week from this Friday, is Nitzavim, Deuteronomy 29, that you are standing here this day, all of you, before God to enter into this covenant. It's everybody. It's men and women. It's everybody on every spectrum of humanity who is Jewish is all part of that covenant. Rachel Adler wrote "Engendering Judaism," and she teaches that Judaism and this chosenness, this distinctiveness should not be hierarchical. She says that it is like a brit ahuvim, a partnership of equals. The distinctiveness of Judaism is meant to model relational responsibility. That to be in covenant with God means being in covenant with each other. And to be part of humanity means we have to be fully a part of humanity, as opposed to being apart from humanity. And the last one is Anita Diamant, whose work I assigned for the Introduction to Judaism class. Anita Diamant writes that Jews by choice often understand chosenness as a profound responsibility in ways that Jews by accident, Jews by birth might not. Because if you are born to something, it's easy to discard it or not to appreciate it. But if you have an inheritance that you have to continue to earn, as opposed to it just being given to you, it is worth more. If you make the fortune yourself, you are less likely to squander it than a fortune that you inherit. I inherited Judaism, but not a fortune. Many modern Jews are, as I say, uncomfortable with this word chosen, fearing that it suggests superiority. But reinterpreted, this distinctiveness means This particularism means being chosen to do something, to bring blessing, justice, and ethical living to the world. The distinctiveness of Judaism, Shabbat on a different day than the Christians and the Muslims have, the Hebrew language, wherever we may live, holidays that are different than anybody else's. These things sustain our identity. But Jewish life cannot just stop at the walls of the synagogue. Jewish life is not just religion. It's called outward toward the world's needs. And when we look around the world and see the suffering, we know that chosenness is not about why us. It's about for what purpose are we created, which is why it is so difficult in moments like this, when we are torn between being Jewish and being human. This is where the real pain of being a conscientious progressive Jew is felt. That I don't know of any thoughtful human being who rejoices at what's happening in Gaza. I don't believe that you can say that what is happening in Gaza is cause for rejoicing. But the death of innocents, look back to Avram. What was it that made Avram different than Noah? Avram petitioned for the well-being of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, where Noah watched the rest of the world be destroyed by flood and didn't speak up for anybody. But Abram argued with God. Jews are supposed to argue. And being able to hold that nuance and hold two facts and truths in your head at the same moment, that one, what's happening in Gaza is awful, and two, that Israel does not bear sole or even primary responsibility for the suffering of people in Gaza, that Hamas bears responsibility for the suffering of people in Gaza. But do we want to be like Hamas? No, of course not. So there's that tension. Do you want to be better than your enemy? Yeah. Do you want to survive? Yeah. And what is the distance? What is the length to which you can go to maintain your distinctiveness in order to just to survive? And at what point do you lose your distinctiveness? Do you lose your ethical grounding in the cause of being humanist? The heart of chosenness is not about separation. So this tension, being particularly Jewish and universally human, it's not about separation. I firmly believe that you can't live a fully meaningful Jewish life in the year 2025 without a deep relationship with the state of Israel. So I don't live in Israel. The taxes are just horrendous. The gas prices are ridiculous. I don't think they want me for the army anymore. But I love Israel. I don't want to live there. I just like, I love New York, but I don't want to live there either. But I don't consider New York to be my homeland. I'm an American whose heart is always in Jerusalem. And that separation is not just about geography, but there are plenty of people who just feel no connection. There are plenty of Jews who feel absolutely no connection at best, or at worst, feel real antipathy, a real anger, hatred towards the state of Israel, because they're out of balance between the universal and the particular. The best example, the crudest example that I can give is Queers for Palestine, which just, to me, it sounds like Vegetarians for Meat.
Yeah.
And then people say, Israel is pink washing, horseshit. That there's one place in the Middle East where you're not going to get executed for being gay, Israel. Now, if you're willing to sacrifice everything else just because you believe something that you saw on TikTok, gay Gesundheit, study Torah instead. Judaism is not meant to be devoured in sound bites. It's meant 4,000 years of history and tradition, and a strong Jewish sense tells you that if you value human dignity, you have to stand with Israel, especially if you're Jewish, because if you want to be an LGBTQ Jew, you're not going to get off the plane. You're not going to get onto the plane on Etihad Airlines to go make your very happy life in Qatar. And you're going to be thrown off a roof in Gaza. You're going to get drafted in Israel. Israel doesn't have the don't ask, don't tell. I'll tell you, it's a true story. When I was staffing Taglit Birthright Israel trips, one of the highlights of these Birthright trips, did any of you go on it or have kids or grandchildren who went on Birthright Israel trips? Your kids did? So the highlight for all these Birthright trips is when they have what's called the mifgash, or the meetup with a group of soldiers who join the bus for 5 of the 9 days. And they love it because the soldiers love it because they get, they're free range of diaspora Jews to pick from, who are they're excited by the uniform. These are men and women who love the uniform, and they all exaggerate with it. Oh, I'm the most important. I'm the chief of the staff for the Israeli Defense Force. And the guy who's like, he plays the bugle at funerals. But one year I was staffing a trip, and it was during Operation Cast Lead, one of the wars in Gaza. So all of the elite soldiers were in Gaza or in the north on the border. The people who were getting together with the Birthright students were not the tip of the sword. And we had a guy whose job was, he was a barber in the military, because everybody serves. You need barbers in the army. And there was somebody who was a singer, whose job was to go around at the bases and sing Hatikva. And he had a beautiful voice. This guy who was like straight out of central casting from Broadway. He was wearing an IDF uniform, but I was surprised there weren't sequins on it. Because remember how Liberace would come out with a 50-pound jacket and the rings? This guy, that's all he was missing. And everybody loved him. And there was a guy, I was working in Texas, and there was a guy on our trip who was paying his way through the University of Texas on the GI Bill, who had been in the Marines. And he just fell in love with this guy. And he said, "This is the Israeli army." He said, "This guy wouldn't last 2 seconds in the American army. He would have been bullied out." He said, "In Israel, this guy's a hero. He's doing his responsibility, and he's being who he is." We say in the army, in the US Army, the motto used to be all you can be. This guy was being all he could be in the Israeli army. Try and do that in the Jordanian army. The heart of chosenness is not separation, but mission. To live so that we make the world better, not just for ourselves, but for everybody else. To live as a Jew who is distinctively Jewish is to be called, not to privilege, but to responsibility. Not just about pride, but about purpose. Jewish distinctiveness matters because it gives us the strength and the language and the community to be a blessing to the rest of the world. And this is, I think, especially meaningful in places like Canton and Worcester, and where else do we have? And wherever else we might live. Massillon, maybe, I don't know.
Green.
Where?
Green.
Green, okay. Even in Summit County, there are 3 Jews left. That was David Ben-Gurion's original name, Green. You should rename it Ben-Gurion. So you're going to Ben-Gurion. For those of us who choose not to live in a place that is majority Jewish, we stand out as being distinctive. How many of you have had to come to your children or grandchildren's school, or even yourselves to school, to explain what a dreidel is? Or make potato pancakes and stink up the whole school? Or tell what Passover is, or go to your friend's church for a Seder? Because why are they asking you? Because you're the Jewish person that they know. And that is part of our blessing of being distinctively Jewish, is that we live in a place where we cannot blend in. That's what I mentioned at Bob Friedman of blessed memory at his memorial services. Bob Friedman was just a mensch of all mensches in general, but in particular, 2 things. One, he came from a larger Jewish community in Columbus, and was blessed to bring Diane from a larger Jewish community in Indianapolis to Canton, where 2 things. Number one, he was proudly, distinctively, and loudly Jewish. And it's hard to think of Bob Friedman doing anything loudly. But his advocacy statewide as a Jew, people knew this is a Jew. And the second thing is he did it in a smaller Jewish community where it's much easier to hide in a place like Cleveland. But if you're going to live as an active Jew in Canton, you're going to know everybody, which is why I think that person at BJ's was trying to mess with me. I think it might have been a Messianic Jew because I didn't recognize him or her. Challah, what's that? I don't know. Can you tell me where the shrimp is? To be distinctively Jewish in a place like this is to welcome the questions. As silly as they are, or as silly as they seem, people want to meet Jews. And that's part of our mission. One of the things that Hitler wanted to do was to create a museum to the dead race of the Jews. Which is why the Torah scroll that belongs to on permanent loan to Shari Torah that's out in the lobby here was intended for that museum of the dead race of the Jews. You want to experience ancient Egypt, you go to modern Egypt and walk the pyramids, but there's no pharaoh. And don't go in there, you'll get a curse. Not because of the pharaoh, but because you're Jewish. You want to see Israel, you want to see Jews, come to life, go to Israel, because you can see above the ground real live Jews practicing Judaism on Shabbat, some walking to the Western Wall, some sitting on their balconies in Haifa smoking, some taking their dogs for a walk in Tel Aviv, some davening or staying inside because the Eruv is down, whatever. You see Judaism practiced above ground in all different kinds of ways. And you can also go deep. Don't go to the pyramids, go underneath Jerusalem and see the archaeological sites. And you can see how this chosen people has been enduring for thousands of years through adaptation and through a universal mission that says the world needs Jews. And in order for the world to have Jews, it is the responsibility of Jews to ensure that we're still here. In order to be universalistic, we have to be individualistic. I am of no use to the world as a Jew if I'm not Jewish. So in the introduction to Judaism class, I always point to the two walls in this room and the difference between them. The great poverty of American progressive Judaism, and in this category I would put Reform, Reconstructionist, and Conservative Judaism, all non-Orthodox Judaism, and I'm a product of this, is the great poverty is that we focus almost exclusively on this side of the room. What's on this wall over here? Kids' books, pediatric Judaism. Judaism where the learning ends at 13, or at 15 or 16 if you go through confirmation. And what's on that wall? Tanakh, the Talmud, the Mishnah, law codes. There's some of that over here too, because we ran out of space over there. Prayer books, all of the things that are much deeper. So our poverty is that we teach kids Judaism at a pediatric level, which is appropriate, without the responsibility that comes from being a Jewish adult, that comes with being a Jewish adult. And it's much more interesting, the learning, as adults. And there's a thirst for it. As you can see, there are more people here than there are typically on a Friday night. The people want to, or in person, there are people who want to learn, because the distinctiveness of Judaism is important for Jews to be able to appreciate, especially when the rest of the world doesn't want us. We need that inner locus of control, that sense that, yeah, we belong in the world, and we belong here, and we are just in our cause for being Jewish because we are called for something different. I want to give the last word to Rabbi Sachs, and then I'll open it up for any comments. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs.
We say we are a chosen people, Asher Bocha Banu Mikol Ha'amim, who chose us from all other nations. And that's really quite a difficult thing to say, because after all, aren't we all one humanity? Didn't God create every human being in his image? Didn't he, after the flood, make a covenant with all humanity? So what does it mean to be chosen? And I think it means something like this. God makes us all different. And he took one person, Abraham, and then one couple, Abraham and Sarah, who became a family, who became a tribe, who became a collection of tribes, who became the Jewish people, and said, be different, to teach the world the dignity of difference. That you can be different from others and still be special. You can be different from others and still be loved by God, because God loves diversity. That's why he created such an interesting universe. He could have created one language. Well, there was just one of Babel. He said, no, I want lots of languages. Today, there are 6,000 languages spoken throughout the world. There are 250,000 different kinds of leaf, 3 million different forms of life. Every human being, even identical twins, are different because God loves difference. And he gave us, the world, the Jewish people, who really are different, and said, you see these people who are different? I love them. I chose them. Because difference does not mean you are hated, reviled, treated an outsider. Most people do that to people who are different. God says, difference is what I love. And it is that message that we, the Jewish people, were placed down here on earth to make real in people's lives, people's consciousness, and in history. The people who dared to be different.
He wrote the book, The Dignity of Difference, in response to September 11th, 2001. It was 24 years ago tomorrow. And seeing the clash of civilizations and how easy it is to demonize somebody who's different than you. Sachs points out there is great dignity in difference. Should we be universalist or pluralistic? Yes. Thoughts or questions? Yes, Dr. Burton.
Would you say the idea of being a chosen people has kept the Jewish religion or group from proselytizing, from spreading the religion to the rest of the world, and has really done a lot to separate us from people who might want to become Jewish?
So has the idea of chosenness kept us from proselytizing? And so I'll say two things. One, I think that proselytizing would be antithetical to Judaism because of our distinctiveness, that we don't think the rest of the world has to be Jewish. There's not the mission of Judaism is not to make everybody Jewish, as opposed to the mission of Christianity, which is salvation through faith. So you want to spread the good news, and if the highest love that you can show to somebody is to bring them into relationship with God. The other piece is that we are not, as was pointed out in the first video, we're not a race, so people can become Jewish, but it's not easy. And the fact that it isn't easy historically has meant shunning people, but it also it's changed within the last 50 years, particularly in North America within the Reform movement with outreach, which is still going on. It's why there are now Introduction to Judaism classes in just about every Jewish community for people who are seekers. That is the primary avenue through which people choose Judaism in this congregation, because we're welcoming without being, we lower the threshold for people to enter, but we don't go outside of our walls and put up billboards that say, like, Got Judaism? Remember those Got Milk ads? So there's something mysterious about being Jewish, but it's not frightening. I give a lot of credit to anybody who chooses to cast their lot with our people. Marcia?
With the rise of Christianity, didn't they make it almost illegal to convert if somebody wanted to convert to Judaism and they were found out by the Christian authorities, they would be put to death as well as the rabbi who was converting them. Thus, we got the rule that you had to be turned away 3 times to make sure that you really wanted to be Jewish, because you were doing it
You're not doing it for any kind of benefit. Yeah.
right.
At various times because and it's not specifically because of church teaching, it's because of what we call Christendom, the intersection of the church and government. That Christianity is not anti-Jewish, but Christendom certainly excluded Jews and would make it, that's what led to the Crusades and the Inquisition and pogroms. Ultimately, the Holocaust all grew out of European Christian anti-Semitism that dehumanized Jews and really not only discouraged other people from becoming Jewish, but discouraged Jews from wanting to interact with anybody who wasn't Jewish.
Probably one other thing. If as Jews, if we're doing, if a good Jew is really doing God's work and doing what a person should be like, why are some branches of Judaism, like Marcia said, closing off, not letting people in? I mean, if this is really the way that people should live and really think about God, why do we close the doors to so many people? I can give you one example. I was once in an Orthodox. Synagogue, and it was just beginning to start the prayer, and a woman knocked on the door and said, "I'm hungry. Could you let me in?" And they asked her, "Are you Jewish?" And she said, "No, I'm just hungry." They said, "Well, there's a place a few miles down the road that you can go since you're not Jewish."
That's unfortunate.
Why do we do things like that? Why don't we accept people who want more easily to? Are we afraid we're going to dilute the religion? Is that what we're afraid of? What are we afraid of by not letting more people in? As Reformed Judaism does a better job than other branches.
I don't have an answer for you. I don't know why somebody would. There's nothing that says that you have, but something says to participate in Jewish life, you have to be Jewish. There's nothing that says to eat kosher food, you have to be Jewish. In fact, there are only a few things in this congregation that you have to be Jewish to do. You have to be Jewish to be a member, or you have to be partnered with or widowed from somebody who was Jewish. In order to have an aliyah, you have to be Jewish. Now you're going to say, but you've had people. No, here's a distinction. At B'nai Mitzvah, at least one person doing the aliyah has to be Jewish. I will allow a couple, the parents. If one parent is not Jewish, I will welcome both parents up there as long as one of the people doing it is Jewish. Lighting the Shabbat candles, as long as one of the people who's doing it is Jewish, specifically because the language of the prayers say, Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, who has sanctified us with these commandments. So in order, but as far as blocking the door, my hunch is that we're fearful of strangers. Look, the door here is always locked, and we've grown suspicious. Somebody looks different, we think you don't belong. That's why when I do the training for the high holidays ushers and greeters, for me it's more about hospitality than about security. I'm not in the security business. I don't know. In the hospitality business, think about what it takes for somebody to come to a synagogue, even the first time, and what is it that we do to ensure that it's not their last time. So this has happened a number of times here. I've witnessed it, where people are being hospitable, and they say, "Oh, hi, what brings you here?" "I'm a member." "Well, I've never seen you before." Maybe that's why. Or, "Is this your first time here?" Say, "No, I'm a 4th generation member of the congregation." Oh, well, I never see you here. Oh, who the hell are you? I said, well, I've been Jewish for a year and I come every Friday night. Okay, who's right, who's wrong? They're both Jewish. They're both members of the congregation. But we naturally look with suspicion at somebody who's different than we. You've only been Jewish for 50 years? Oh, I've been Jewish for 51 years. Obviously, you're doing it wrong. We're just like everybody else, only more so.
I don't know if this would help. I was in the very, very first conversion class that was ever offered in the city of Cleveland. And this was back in 1967, and when I went, I couldn't get into that class unless you'd already gone to a rabbi, and everything. And the rabbi at the time was a conservative rabbi who told me, we don't throw the door wide open, neither do we make it closed, but we open it a little bit, and we need, it's going to have to take some work on your part to make sure that that's what you truly want to do. And so I ended up in this class, and interestingly, I wasn't engaged to anybody. I wasn't betrothed. I wasn't even I was dating a couple of Jewish guys, but it was like, what are you doing here? Funny. And I think the most common thing I would get was, honey, you don't look Jewish. I was a blonde haired, blue eyed, nice Catholic girl.
That's the best kind of Jewish.
But I became Jewish, but I mean, it was really an interesting kind of thing, because the welcomingness of this small German Jewish congregation that had started out Reformed in the old Mayfield Temple, that was conservative at that particular time. The elderly ladies sat me down in between them to make sure that I knew what, they would let me follow in the prayer book and stuff. And they put me right in line with the cantor, who was an Irish tenor and who spoke so clearly. I was able to really pick up much of the music and the hymns and all of the other stuff. So I have that thank you to that very early congregation that just made really all the difference in the world in terms of my becoming Jewish and remaining Jewish. When I got a divorce, I remember running into somebody at the kosher meat market line. She goes, so are you still going to be Jewish? I said, one didn't have anything to do with the other, honestly.
And it took, because your granddaughter was very involved with Hillel.
Oh, yeah. My granddaughter was very, very involved with Hillel and stuff. And, my kids, my daughter and her husband are very involved. And they've stayed within the conservative congregation and everything. My son, not so much. But that's okay.
Give him time.
Huh? Yeah. But I would say he's more of a cultural Jew, and so. But just to share, I mean, that's just been my experience.
Well, we're glad that you decided to take the class in 1967, and it stuck, and it kept. So next time we're going to look. I already forgot what we're looking. What are we looking at next time? Tradition and innovation. That. How much do we innovate? How much do we maintain tradition? That's a constant tension. So think of this between now and next week. If you should happen to get into a car or turn on a TV or a radio or a light on Shabbat and think, oh my goodness, would Maimonides have done that? No, Maimonides would not. Because he didn't have a car, they didn't have electricity, they didn't have anything. But he would have wrestled with the idea. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. It's Wednesday. It's too early to say Shabbat Shalom and too late to say Shavua Tov.